we're going to talk a little bit about police. I'm going to show you a clip here that got attention for other reasons. Some of you may know Jack Del Rio, who has been a coach in the NFL for quite some time. He's been a head coach and a defensive coordinator. He is currently with the Washington Commanders, who have all sorts of issues as an organization to anyone who's been paying any attention to that. But this clip is Del Rio talking about January 6th. And that's the part that's gotten a lot of attention. I'm a little bit more interested in some of the other framing in this clip, but I have a lot to say about this. So we're going to show the clip in question, and then we're going to go ahead and discuss the implications of it.
I'd talk about it with anybody. Yeah, no problem. At any time. But they're not. I'm just expressing myself. And I think we all as Americans have the right to express ourselves, especially if you're being respectful. I'm being respectful. I just asked a simple question. Really, let's get right down to it. What did I ask? A simple question. Why are we not looking into those things? If we're going to talk about it, why are we not looking into those things? Because it's kind of hard for me to say I can realistically look at it. I see the images on TV. People's livelihoods are being destroyed. Businesses are being burned down. No problem. And then we have a dust up at the Capitol. Well, there's nothing burned down. And we're not going to talk about, we're going to make that a major deal. I just think it kind of two standards. And if we apply the same standard and we're going to be reasonable with each other, let's have a discussion. That's all it was. Let's have a discussion. We're Americans. Let's talk it through. I'm for us, having a great opportunity to have a fulfilled life. Like I said, every which way I can, when I'm here, it's about love and respect.
All right. So there's a lot to dive into there, right? So what's getting all the attention is that he's obviously kind of downplaying January 6th. Listen, whatever your opinions are, I'm not trying to minimize what happened on January 6th, but that to me is just a little bit of a less interesting aspect of this. And quite frankly, the reason I haven't talked much about January 6th is because everybody else is talking about nothing but January 6th. And I try to fill in gaps in the media coverage instead of regurgitating the same shit that you all can go hear on CNN. So that element, take that part for what you will, right? You all can have your own opinions about his downplaying January 6th. The part that's really interesting to me is the way that he frames everything else. So first of all, he frames the Black Lives Matter protest, which is pretty obviously what he was talking about there, as like burning things down, right? He frames it as though it was a riot without acknowledging what it's in response to. So this is a very convenient trick. We were talking earlier about propaganda by omission. If you just start the story at the most convenient point possible, you can frame anything basically however you want. So if you ignore the violence that police are inflicting upon society, and you just start the story after that violence and say, well, look, these people are breaking windows. I mean, my God, the humanity. You can frame it like it's a riot and like it's violent and ridiculous without acknowledging that it's actually in response to systemic and constant and racist violence at the hands of police. So he conveniently ignores what's actually causing this situation, and then he frames the protesters as though they're all violent, looting, rioting thugs, okay? That's outrageous. That's simply outrageous. That's an admission that he is not paying any attention whatsoever to what is happening in the country, right? And then the second point is for him to say that that's like acceptable. I can't remember exactly what words he used, but he basically implied that there was no response to rioters and looting and burning buildings down. Jack, there is significantly more legal consequence for protesters burning a building down than there ever is for police for killing people, brutalizing people, misconduct, wrongful arrests, etc., etc., etc. Significantly, this idea that there is no consequence for protesters who engage in property damage is ridiculous. There is a disproportional amount of consequence for protesters who engage in property damage. And the police are let off scot-free. So the whole framing is ridiculous to start with. And another point, you guys, even if you want to take the legal stuff out of it and talk about like the media or public narratives or rhetoric, why does Jack know about what's happening in those quote unquote riots? Why does Jack know that places are being burned down? Is it because the media was hyper fixated on people burning down a building? That's the exact opposite of how Jack framed it, as though there is no attention paid, as though society says nothing to see here. That is not what happens. The media hyperfixates on property damage, consistently misframes protesters as violent and rioting thugs. The only reason Jack has the opinion he has is because he's wrong. It's because there is actually a significant response to protesters who engage in property damage, and there is almost no response to police when they engage in violence. Okay? So everything about the way that he framed that is completely wrong. And then he uses it as a comparison to January 6th, and that's what catches all the attention. So shame on Jack. He was fined $100,000 by his head coach. And we'll see if there are any further consequences for that. But this is, you guys, what an utterly ridiculous thing to say. He basically just told on himself. He came out to the camera and said, I pay no attention to current events. I don't educate myself. But I'm still going to speak authoritatively as though I do educate myself. That sort of Dunning-Kruger, right? Well, I saw a Fox News report, so now I'm an expert. Just ridiculous. Just flat out fucking ridiculous. And by the way, where's Fox News telling him to shut up and coach? I don't think they were telling him to shut up and coach, right? That's just a little side point. But when it's LeBron advocating for something that's tepidly progressive or kind of progressive, they say shut up and dribble. Shut up and dribble. When it's Kaepernick taking a knee, they want him blacklisted, right? Oh, you traitor to the country when it's Kaepernick taking a knee. But when it's Jack Del Rio spewing a bunch of nonsense and criticizing the Black Lives Matter protests and criticizing the January 6th commission, then Fox has no problem with it, and the conservatives have no problem with it. That's just a little side point, but it's hard not to point out the rank hypocrisy on the right when it comes to these kinds of things. So, way to go, Jack. Thanks for telling us all how fucking ignorant you are. I hope you enjoy the $100,000 fine. Two more stories here pertaining to police. Some of you may have heard of the murder of Patrick Lyoya in Michigan. This in NPR, written by NPR staff. A Michigan police officer is charged with murder in Patrick Lyoya shooting. Police officer in Michigan has been charged with second-degree murder following a shooting of Patrick Lyoya that took place on April 4th. Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schurr shot the unarmed Lyoya man. The unarmed Lyoya in the back of the head following a struggle during a traffic stop. Kent County prosecutor Chris Becker said Schurr has turned himself in and will be arraigned tomorrow. As Lyoya was on the ground, Schurr demanded that he let go of the officer's taser and then fired the fatal shot. Schurr told Lyoya, a refugee from the Congo, that he stopped him because of an issue with his license plate. When he asked for Lyoya's driver's license, Lyoya started to run. After Schurr caught him, the two men struggled prior to the fatal shot. Okay. I don't like some of the framing on that. Oh my God, you guys, I'm sorry. I was showing you the wrong fucking screen, wasn't I? This was what I meant to show you. It's an NPR article if you want to go read it. I just read it to you verbatim. This was a pretty outrageous example. Grabbing an officer's taser is not a threat to the officer's life. That's the first thing. Neither is running from the officer a threat to the officer's life or a threat to anyone else's life. So firing a shot into the back of somebody's head is thoroughly unjustified under those circumstances, pretty much regardless of how you want to interpret the law. So rare instance of an officer being charged. We will see what comes of this. Unfortunately, that's kind of the exception that proves the rule. We'll keep up on that story. But you guys, cops shoot and kill well over 1,000 people per year in this country. We're on pace to exceed the number of murders at the hands of police that we had last year. A lot of those people are unarmed compared to, the rates that you see in other countries. And this is a systemic problem. We need to defund and abolish police and start from scratch. That's what needs to happen. This is an institution that was born out of slave catchers, and it's an institution that has continued to behave in racist, oppressive, classist ways throughout its entire existence. And, these examples happen all the fucking time. Over 1,000 people a year. You guys do the math. That's like 3 people a day, at least, that police shoot and kill. In other countries, that'll happen 3 times a year. Seriously, like seriously. So we will keep up on that story. I hope that that officer is held to account. We need to start holding many more officers to account, and we need to hold the institution itself to account by defunding it. One more police story here, you guys. This from my neck of the woods, the Seattle area. This in AP. Judge release photos of tattoos on cop charged with murder. A judge has ordered the release of 78 photographs of tattoos that cover the body of a suburban Seattle police officer charged with murder, but said prosecutors must redact about half after finding them inflammatory. Guys, it's because he's a fucking Nazi. Like we all know, right? We all know what's happening here. And saying their release could jeopardize the officer's right to a fair trial. He plasters all over himself, I'm a Nazi. And the judge is like, well, we can't let the jury see that. Oh, God, right? Oh, God. Imagine if this was like a gang member. Do you think the judge would be like, well, that tattoo's inflammatory and it might, it might prejudice the jury, so we better not show it to him. Can you even imagine? Of course not. King County Superior Court Judge Nicole Gaines Phelps on Wednesday said the release of 38 photographs of Auburn Police Department Officer Jeff Nelson's extensive body art does not endanger his defense or violate his right to privacy. The Seattle Times reported the rest, taken by prosecutors as they build their case against Nelson in the 2019 on-duty shooting death of Jesse Sarey, must be redacted and cannot be seen in their entirety by the public. The redactions include visible wording inked on his stomach, chest, neck, and legs, according to an exhibit filed by the judge after the hearing. Seattle Times had filed a public disclosure request seeking all photos, and its attorneys tried to persuade the judge that their release was in the public interest, given that Nelson is the first police officer in King County in decades to be charged with homicide for the use of deadly force while on duty. Now, of course, that last bit is also quite an admission, because there have been plenty of officer-involved killings in King County. Seattle police actually pretty notoriously horrible department. They had to be under federal oversight for years because of the violence that they inflicted upon people. Violence toward protesters, murdering unarmed people, et cetera, et cetera. And yet this is the first officer in decades to be charged in King County for homicide. So quite an admission, an accidental one at the end of that article. But guys, there was reporting previously that one of the tattoos was a Mussolini quote. That was reported when this story first broke. He also apparently, one of the tattoos, I think this one they're letting the public see. It said something about better 12 than 8. If you don't know what that means, it's a saying among police that you would rather be judged by a jury of 12 than carried by 8 people while you're in a casket. In other words, his whole attitude about policing is, I would rather kill somebody else and go to court for it than have someone else kill me. Well, if that's your attitude towards the public, the people that you're supposed to serve, I think you can see how there is going to be a quick trigger, so to say, a jump to violent action in response to virtually any behavior that is, seen by a member of the public. And this is a very common thread among police, just so that we're clear. So these tattoos really do kind of speak to the attitude of the officer and the way that the officer views his job. So I think we all know what's happening here. It's very likely that the ones that they're redacting have to do with support for fascism and Nazism or white supremacy or some combination thereof. So the judge decides public can't see that. Of course, the redaction itself is probably enough to imply these things, and the public should probably take note of that kind of story. But this, again, you guys, just goes to demonstrate just how right-wing and how political police truly are. It's not to say every officer, but as a whole, as a system, as a structure, as an institution, right-wing fascist organizations, right? That want to operate with impunity, that want to be violent to the Black community and impoverished communities and the homeless community, and want impunity for that violence. They want to engage in asset forfeiture and misconduct and planting evidence and wrongful arrests, and they want to be treated with impunity for that conduct. It's just another and a continuation of a pretty poor pattern of police behavior. We, again, will keep up on that story going forward. But that's just two examples of just how wrong Jack Del Rio was in his framing of that entire little spiel that he gave to reporters the other day.